Hey guys, this is Jeff from untitled.com and this is my review of the Sony Xperia Z3. It's been barely 6 months since the Xperia Z2 has been on sale, but hey, Sony already has a successor. The Sony Xperia Z3 seems like a minor update to the Xperia Z2, but it does improve in some very necessary areas. For example, the display is a lot better now, the processor is much faster, and the glass and metal body is even slimmer than before, all while staying just as waterproof as ever. So here's what I think about the Sony Xperia Z3. The biggest change between the Xperia Z3 and its predecessor is the size. The Xperia Z3 measures 146 by 72 by 7.3 millimeters, which makes it slightly narrower, shorter, and way more slimmer than the Z2. Granted, the Z3 is still taller than it needs to be for a phone with a 5.2-inch display, but at least you have front-facing speakers this time around. But the result of those slimmish bezels means that the phone isn't as wide, which means it's a lot easier to use one-handed than the Z2. Sony has used the same omni-balance design once again with the Xperia Z3, but they've tweaked it by introducing a much slimmer metal and glass unibody. With the tapered edges and rounded sides of the Xperia Z3, it's a lot easier to hold in your hand, a lot more comfortable than the Xperia Z2 and Z1 from last year. So much so that I would say this is the most comfortable Xperia flagship phone that I've used. As you can tell, I got the white version to review, which is pretty nice and looks premium enough. The black version does have a problem with catching fingerprints because of the glass at the back, though my favorite version has to be the bronze goldish color that Sony also sells the Xperia Z3, and that color looks really nice in person. But hey, let's talk about the display. The Sony Xperia Z3 has a 5.2-inch 1080p tri-luminous IPS LCD display at the front. Sony's actually quite proud of how it can reach a very high 600 nits of brightness, and I'm pretty sure that's true because as you can see right now, that display is really bright. A bright display means this is very easily usable outdoors with no problems at all, and the anti-reflective coating on the screen also does help in that regard. This is all very appreciated because with a camera phone you'd want to be using this outdoors to take pictures. At the same time, this display can also go all the way down to 4 nits of brightness, which means this is very comfortable to use even when you're reading in bed at night or you're in a movie theater and you're trying to check some emails or something. At least in complete darkness it won't blind you. Sony also has their proprietary X Reality engine, which does a really good job of boosting saturation and contrast. This ensures that the color reproduction in the gallery and video players automatically looks just as nice as AMOLED displays, for example. For some weird reason though, this is not enabled by default in the settings, so you're gonna have to go into display settings and choose the X Reality for mobile. That being said, color fidelity is a bit of an issue and the screen tends to look a little bit bluish overall. You can change the white balance in the display settings though, so it's not a big deal. Apart from that, there's also a super sensitive mode so you can use the screen with gloves on, and viewing angles are pretty good and way better than the Xperia Z and the Xperia Z1 from last year. Alright, talking about the phone itself, at the top you just have the 3.5mm audio jack with a tiny pinhole for the noise cancelling microphone. At the bottom you have no ports at all, keeping it very minimalistic and stylish. At the left side you have the magnetic port for Sony's little proprietary charger thing. You also have this protector flap over what is the micro USB charging port. The metal flap is much easier to remove than last year's flaps over the Z2 and Z1. It pops up very easily and is very easy to get back in as well. On the right side you have the dedicated camera key, which is much appreciated because you can open the camera app from anywhere. You also have the volume rocker button and the screen lock button, which works pretty okay but is a little hard to find and feel. In my opinion, the feedback on the button could have been a little bit better. There's also another flap covering the microSD and microSIM card slot. Now the reason for all of these flaps is that the Xperia Z3 is waterproof. In fact, it's even more waterproof than the Xperia Z2 and even the Galaxy S5. The Xperia Z2 has an IP65/68 rating. This means it can last for more than an hour underwater at up to 5 feet of depth. Coming to the back, you'll find the camera lens right over here with a single LED flash with a little noting of the NFC logo, the Sony logo right in the center, and the Xperia logo at the bottom. So you're probably wondering where are the speakers on this thing. In fact, it has front-facing speakers, but as you can see, they're much smaller and nowhere near HTC's boom sound level of quality. All in all, I really like the design of the Sony Xperia Z3. It's very comfortable to hold and use, even though it's a larger phone. And while it might not look drastically different compared to the Z2 and the Z1, I still think it looks nice enough, though if you are getting one, I would highly recommend getting the bronzish, goldish color instead. Alright, let's talk about hardware. The Sony Xperia Z3 is powered by a massively powerful quad-core Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 processor. This is clocked at 2.5 GHz and there's also a generous 3 GB of RAM to back it up, 16 GB of internal memory, and if that wasn't enough, there's also a microSD card slot as well. As you can tell from those specs, performance is generally really nice and fast overall with no lag when you're scrolling around the UI. UI, or even opening up apps. Everything's generally very fast and you won't see any of the occasional choppiness that plagues the Galaxy S5, for example. The Xperia Z3 also did really well in benchmark results, which you can check out over at unleashedphones.com. In terms of connectivity, the Xperia Z3 features LTE Cat4, HSPA+, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth 4.0, NFC, DLNA, and even MHL. The only thing missing though is an infrared port, so you can't actually use the phone to control a TV or an AC like you could use with the LG G2 and the G3 and the HTC One M8 and the Galaxy S5. Coming to software, the Sony Xperia Z3 runs Android 4.4.4 KitKat, which is currently the latest version of the operating system that's available to use. As you can tell, Sony has their own Timescape UI on top of it, which is slightly more user-friendly compared to stock Android. Sony's UI is stylish enough and easy enough to use. Apart from changing the look of the stock UI and built-in apps, the UI is similar to what most Android phones have, with a home screen at the front where you can place widgets or app shortcuts, and an app drawer where you can see all of your installed apps listed. There's even themes available in case you want to change up the look of the UI and give it a slight refresh, and there's a whole bunch of them built in, as you can see. The app drawer, or the main menu, also has the ability to have folders inside it so you can organize your apps better. There's also a nice little menu which you can slide out from the side over there where you can organize the apps alphabetically or according to most used or according to recently installed. There's also a shortcut to the Play Store right over here, and you can also go into an uninstall mode in case you want to uninstall apps right from the screen itself. Apart from that, it's your basic Android UI with a whole bunch of Google apps and pre-installed that you can use. Sony also has a bunch of mini apps which they call small apps that you can get to by pressing the multitasking button. You'll see the list of apps over here, but you'll see the small apps listed right over here. You can tap on one to open up, for example, a tiny little calculator app that can hover over whatever you're doing. You can have up to 6 of these running on the screen at the same time. Personally, I'm not really a big fan of the small apps. I really don't find much use for these, but if you're somebody that really likes multitasking, this might come in a little bit handy. There's also built-in screen recording functionality out of the box, so you can record whatever you're doing on the phone just by long pressing the volume button. When you long press the volume button, you can see a little option that says screenshot or record screen. If you hit record screen, you'll get a little disclaimer right there, and behold, it starts recording your screen. So whatever you do on the phone can be put into a nice little video. You can record the screen in either 1080p or 720p resolution. This feature has actually been built into Android since KitKat came around, but Sony seems to be the first manufacturer to actually integrate that feature into their UI. Coming to web browsing, you'll find that Google's Chrome is the default browser and performs quite well on the Xperia Z3. Loading is super quick and navigating and scrolling around web pages is fluid enough and worry-free, and generally overall browsing is actually a really nice experience. Of course, if you're not a big fan of Google's Chrome browser, you can always install a third-party browser from the Google Play Store. Coming to multimedia, videos, images, and games all look great on the large 5.2-inch IPS display, and the built-in Movies app even has support for all major file formats and codecs, and the Movies app can also pull in information about the videos if they're TV shows or movies. In case you find a file that the Movie Player app can't play, you can always just download something like VLC Player from the Google Play Store. It's also worth noting that this is the first phone that can act as a remote control for your PlayStation 4. So if you have a PlayStation 4, you can pause a game on your PlayStation 4. And using the Xperia Z3, you can connect to your PlayStation 4 and continue playing that game, where your Z3 will act as a kind of mini display for you. It's actually a very cool feature if you have a PlayStation 4. I don't have a PlayStation 4, so I couldn't really test out that feature for myself. But I did test out that feature at Sony's launch of the Z3, and it looked kind of okay. It looked pretty cool. Apart from that, Sony's image gallery app looks great and sorts your images in a grid of thumbnails that you can pinch to rearrange in case you want bigger or smaller thumbnails. Then there's Sony's Walkman player, which also looks really great and has some very interesting features, such as the ability to listen to music in Clear Audio Plus, which is supposed to give audio even more clarity. And there's xLoud, which is a sound enhancer, and there's even a regular equalizer with built-in presets as well. As if all of that wasn't enough, Sony has also included high resolution quality upscaling for audio and active noise cancellation headphone support in the Xperia Z3. This is the first time that Sony's digital sound enhancement engine technology has been present on a mobile phone, and this allows for the Xperia Z3 to upscale tracks that are in MP3 or AAC format. This works really well, and there's a huge difference in low quality tracks, and they sound really great on the Xperia Z3. Audio via headphones is also really good, though in some regions the Xperia Z3 does not come with any headphones in the box. All in all, multimedia on the Xperia Z3 is a pretty good deal. But that being said, let's move on to the camera. At first glance, the Xperia Z3 might appear to have the same 20.1 megapixel camera as the Xperia Z2, which is kind of true because it's the same sized Exmor RS sensor, but the new camera module has a new 25mm G lens optics with f2.0 among other improvements. You can also now shoot up to 12,800 ISO ISO sensitivity. The large sensor is larger than the sensors on any other flagship camera phone right now. In fact, the only sensor bigger than this right now is the one on the Nokia Lumia 1020, which released last year and is much bigger than the Xperia Z3. Sony's camera UI is really easy to understand and easy enough to use, especially if you stick with their superior auto mode. The superior auto mode does a really good job of automatically choosing the best settings for whatever scene you're trying to take a picture of. For the most part, it's also very accurate. I should also point out that the superior auto mode shoots at about 8 megapixels, but uses the entire optics of the 20 megapixel sensor and scales the image down, similar to Nokia's PureView technology. This allows people to end up with a very shareable 8 megapixel shot, which is very high quality and has very low artifacting. And it also allows you to use the clear zoom feature, which is basically lossless like digital zoom. Again, just like Nokia's PureView technology. Since the size of an 8 megapixel shot is much lower and much easier to share than a 20 megapixel shot, I took a lot of pictures in the superior auto mode at 8 megapixels. You can check out all the camera samples over at unleashthephones.com. But in case you are the kind of guy that wants to shoot in 20 megapixels, there is the manual mode where you have a lot more settings to tweak with and a couple scene modes as well. And every picture you take in this mode is in full 20 megapixels. Speaking of which, there's some very interesting modes in Sony's camera UI. For example, there's info shot mode, which will try to give you useful information about whatever you're pointing the camera at. There's also a social live mode, which allows you to broadcast and live stream up to 10 minutes of video to your Facebook account. There's also a live on YouTube mode, which allows you to broadcast again up to 10 minutes of video on your YouTube channel instead of Facebook. And then there's also Sony's fun augmented reality mode. Of course, there's also less gimmicky modes like the background defocus mode, which allows you to take pictures like the HTC One M8, where the background is all bokeh and blurred out. There's also a very cool time shift video mode where you can choose to slow down parts of the video instead of all of the video, similar to the iPhone 5S. There's also a multi-camera mode where you can basically pair with more than one Xperia phone and record the same scene from different angles, which is very cool if you have more than one Xperia phone. And there's also a new face-in mode where you can take a picture of something and take a picture of yourself at the same time, similar to Samsung's dual camera mode. In terms of speed, the Sony Xperia Z3 is actually quite fast at taking pictures. You can take a picture and then move on to take another picture in just a fraction of a second, as you saw right over there. I should also note that the phone does tend to heat up a little bit, but not as much as the Z2, so you won't see the camera app force closing as many times as the Z2 did. Coming to image quality, I was actually surprised by how nice images on the Sony Xperia Z3 looked. While the Z2 tended to oversaturate images quite a bit, the images taken with the Z3 have more natural color reproduction, which means pretty much what you see is what you get. So when you take a picture of something, the colors will look exactly like what you are taking a picture of. It won't look oversaturated or overcomplicated. Apart from the natural colors, white balance is also really good, and you'll be able to see skies very nice and bright, and there's no strange overcast to any of the images, as you can see, and there's also a lot of detail in every shot. Similarly, indoor images also mostly had natural color reproduction, though they could appear a little softer than they should have been. There's a little bit of noise that does creep up, but it's thankfully not at a very visible level. And the LED flash at the back does a pretty okay job of illuminating most scenes, provided it's not too large of a scene, and it does a good job of taking portrait pictures at night as well. The front-facing 2.2 megapixel camera at the front of the Xperia Z3, it's a little bit low resolution compared to Sony's selfie phone, but it does an okay enough job. It isn't very wide angle though, so when you do take a picture, it's just going to be you and none of the friends next to you. As always, I have a whole bunch of camera samples that you can check out over on the blog post at unleashthephones.com. Coming to video recording, the Sony Xperia Z3 can record 4K resolution video, or you can choose to record 1080p video at either 30 frames per second or much smoother 60 frames per second. Quality is pretty great with very natural color reproduction, great detail, and very quick exposure adjustments while you're panning around the scene. Sony has a very cool steady shot software-based stabilization, which works really well and might actually fool a couple people into thinking that there's optical image stabilization on this phone. When you first fire up the 4K resolution video mode, it does give you a warning saying that the Xperia Z3 could heat up, and it actually does. If you record more than 30 seconds of 4K video, you will notice the Z3 warming up quite a bit. And I'm not really a big fan of 4K resolution video because it is really huge in terms of size. For example, a 30-second 4K resolution video that I took was about 250 MB, which is way too much and not very easily shareable. Apart from that, audio recorded with the Sony Xperia Z3's microphones was also really good and very lively. Again, I do have video samples that you can check out right over at the blog. Coming to call quality, the earpiece on the Sony Xperia Z3 is pretty okay. It has average enough call quality for a phone in this price range, but it is loud enough that you can very easily hear callers even in noisy environments, which is definitely appreciated. Voices tended to be a little muffled and slightly distorted at the loudest volume, but that being said, the onboard noise cancellation works great so that all ambient noises around around you or cancel out, allowing callers on the other end to hear you very clearly and loud. Coming to battery life, Sony has managed to stuff a very high capacity 3100 mAh battery in the Xperia Z3. Considering how slim it is, that's quite remarkable, but what's even more remarkable is the battery usage. The battery life on this thing is quite amazing. I was able to get easily 2 days of moderate usage out of the Xperia Z3. Sony officially reached the Z3 at about 16 hours of talk time on 3G, about 10 hours of video playback, and 130 hours of music listening, or about 37 days of standby time. They even officially advertised the Z3 as having 2-day battery life. When I used it moderately, without taking that many pictures, just taking a couple pictures, light usage on 3G, I was still able to get just about 2 days of usage, which is really awesome for a flagship phone in this day and age. On heavy usage, you can still get back at the end of a day with some charge left on the Xperia Z3. That being said, you still might want to charge it every night just to keep it going every day, or you might want to charge it every morning at your work. That being said, charging the Z3 with the included charger in the box does take quite a long time. It took about 4 hours in total, but I would just switch to a better, more high capacity charger which will charge it up much faster. To conclude, when Sony announced the Xperia Z3 a couple of weeks ago, I was kind of confused over the relatively minor upgrades over the Xperia Z2. And it had just been 6 months, so I wasn't really sure why Sony announced a brand new phone so quickly. But admittedly, this has helped Sony stay competitive in the market by releasing really high quality phones that are right up there with the competition. What's amazing though is that over the last 2 weeks of using this phone, I've had no gripes with it at all. In fact, the only minor thing that annoyed me was the large amount of bezel at the top and the bottom of the screen, which really isn't a big deal at all. I mean, sure, it does make the phone a little bit larger than it needs to be, a little bit taller, but hey, this is a waterproof phone and front-facing speakers is definitely appreciated. Competition-wise, there's a couple phones that do compete with the Xperia Z3. There's the LG G3, which has a QHD screen, which is a more high resolution, but the performance and the battery life isn't anywhere as close as to the Xperia Z3. Then there's the Samsung Galaxy S5, which has a camera that's pretty decent and comparable to the Xperia Z3, and it's also waterproof, but the build quality isn't as great and the battery life isn't as great as the Xperia Z3. Then there's the HTC One M8, which has a fantastic build quality and is really fast and has great performance, but the camera in that isn't as great as the Xperia Z3. Then there's the Nokia Lumia 930, which is almost the same deal in terms of camera quality as the Xperia Z3, but can't record 4K resolution video right now. It's also not waterproof and it runs Windows Phone versus Android on the Xperia Z3. Whichever way you look at it, I think the Xperia Z3 is the phone to get right now. It's kind of the best phone all around and does everything you want it to do. Now, I know I said the Xperia Z2 earlier this year was the best phone I've used and I really recommend it to everybody I know. But the Xperia Z3 is slimmer, faster, has a better camera, a way better battery life, and a better display. I guess what I'm trying to say is the Xperia Z2 was the best phone earlier this year, but the Xperia Z3 is even better. Definitely recommend it. As always, that's what I think of the Xperia Z3, but you can check out the full blog post over unleashedphones.com for a more detailed analysis of the Xperia Z3. And as always, if you guys have any questions, you can let me know right in the comment section below. And as always, if you like this video, do hit that like button, maybe subscribe because that would be appreciated. And that's about it. Thanks for watching, guys.